Hello and welcome to the third bonus episode of the Crimson Misery podcast. My name is Will Rainbolt. I hope you all are doing well. If you are listening on Spotify or Apple, please rate the show 5 stars. If you are listening on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment down below if you must. You can also email the pod at crimsonmiserypod@gmail.com. Um, so this is a little different. I've talked about music before on this podcast. I've never devoted an entire episode to talking about a particular band or ranking some albums. So that is what I will do here. I'm going to be ranking. I'm going to do this a little more often. Mostly just putting this in the bonus episode category because it's not normally what I talk about. I'm normally a college basketball podcast. I normally talk about that. I sometimes talk about politics too. So that's normally what I do on this podcast, mostly college basketball, mostly sports related, but today we're doing this. We are if you are if you've already seen the title of this episode, we are ranking the albums of Iron Maiden, famous heavy metal band from the UK. Bruce Dickinson, Steve Harris, Adrian Smith, Dave Murray, Nico McBrain, um, Yannick Gers. Almost forgot his name. Poor guy. But and then the other members like the uh the late Paul Diano, now their first lead singer, Blaze Bailey, their lead singer who took over for Bruce Dickinson in the 90s, and Clive Burr, their former drummer. I think Dennis Stratton was also on their first album, I want to say. Yeah. So great legacy Iron Maiden has. Not everything they've done is gold, but a lot of it is. And I will say right now, Iron Maiden has five, in my opinion, 5 10 out of 10 albums. Their top five are all 10 out of 10 for me. Um, so yeah, I mean, classic metal, classic heavy metal, that came about in the new wave of British heavy metal in the late 70s, early 80s with bands like Saxon and Diamond Head and Tigers of Pantang. Def Leppard was also part of it for a while before they just went like straight glam metal, but that's neither here nor there. Angel Witch, uh, yeah, a lot of classic heavy metal bands from around that time, and Iron Maiden is probably the biggest one of them. And they alongside all of their contemporaries launched the new wave of British heavy metal. Obviously, a lot of them became big, and they also influenced a lot of 80s heavy metal bands like Metallica and Megadeth and Slayer, Anthrax, Exodus. Need I go on? So, yeah, undoubtedly great. And Iron Maiden, one of the biggest heavy metal bands in history. So, um, and one of my personal favorites. So I am somewhat of a an Iron Maiden nerd. I don't, just listen to heavy metal. I mean, I'm not, strictly a metalhead, but it in many ways was my first love. But and also in a way, it allowed me to expand onto a lot of other stuff, like hip hop and pop and a lot of a lot of like um, early blues and jazz music from the 60s, a lot of pop music in the 60s, R&B, straight up rock music, punk rock is another big one for me. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to just stick to like one genre here. I want to do this for do this for a lot of other stuff. Like there was a moment in time where I thought I was like not including his like more recent stuff, but I was thinking about ranking the at least the earlier albums from Kanye West. But then I just thought like, no, it's just not the time for it. With the way he's been acting these last 5 10 years, it seems. Like he's always been controversial, but especially more so. So, yeah, I will be doing more artists from more genres. Um, in hopefully more this year. Like again, as this podcast has grown a little bit for me, I want to start doing some more stuff. So without further ado, let's get going. Let's start the ranking. Iron Maiden has 17 studio albums from 1980 to 2021. They have not released an album in a little over 3 years now. So, yeah, I guess 4 years since it was 2021, but it was later 2021. So, like, does that really matter? Um, so, uh, and I'll talk about it relatively soon. So, yeah, starting off, and also before I start, I should mention, none of so I'm not going to include any live albums. I'm not going to be including the B-sides from the 80s album. Um, yeah, even though like for any Iron Maiden fan, for um, for any metalhead who wants to check them out or who hasn't yet, somehow if you've missed Iron Maiden, please do. Again, their best albums are ear candy. They are just so good. So with that being said, um, let's get it going. And I say that, and then I always have something else to say. So this again, for every list that's out there, it's going to be different. Um, you you probably won't agree with me on a lot of this because that is your opinion, and this is my opinion. This is my list. If you disagree, then do your own list. Or if you do respectfully disagree, talk about your favorite albums. And yeah, I mean it's a subjective list, and we should be allowed to celebrate one of the greatest bands in metal history. So, with that being said, this is going in order from least to best, or worst from least to best, from worst to best, and an album that is kind of universally thought of as their worst is Virtual 11 from 1998. This is the second and final album with Blaze Bailey as their lead vocalist. This is the fourth album in a row without guitarist Adrian Smith, and it's just kind of a disaster. The first track, Future Real, is the best on the album, and aside from that, it's this album's not very good. Um, it's not like Saint Anger from Metallica level bad. Iron Maiden does not have an album like that. They don't have an album like Lulu. They don't have an album like God, what's another heavy metal failure? Uh, Oh well, you get what I mean. But that's what comes to mind. Metallica's or like Risk from Megadeth. Like Iron Maiden doesn't have an album like that. But Virtual 11 comes pretty close to that. Um, yeah, aside from Future Real, I just don't like this album, man, and a lot of other people agree. Um, and like it's not that like you know, it's not that there are just unlistenable songs on this album, but nothing really from what you would expect with Iron Maiden. It's just not much of anything outside of like the first track. Um, because other than that, it's just like it feels like every song kind of bleeds into the next with like no um with no recognition or any voice of their own. Even though this is Iron Maiden, who are very, you know, make songs that even though yeah they can be formulaic at times, a lot of the time they still structure the songs enough to where it's recognizable and you can still sing along, you can still headbang, but this album is just lacks pretty much any of it. So um the less said about Virtual 11 the better. And you'll see the excuse me, this isn't just me hating on Blaze Bailey or anything like that. I actually think he is a good vocalist, but it's just like he was so misused on the two albums. And if you are if you are an Iron Maiden fan, if you think that the X Factor is going to be the next album on the list, it is not. Um, I actually, well, I'll get into the X Factor when I get into it. I don't want to spoil it, but the next album on my list, number 16, the second worst album on the list, isn't even terrible by any stretch of the imagination. I actually like a lot on this album, but when you compare it to a lot of Iron Maiden's catalog, I just don't really like listening to it as much as others. That would be Dance of Death from 2003. Passchendaele's really good. The title track Dance of Death is really good. Rainmaker, Wildest Dreams is really good. Um, and outside of that, I just don't really like this album all that much. I mean, there's not really much else to say on this one. Yeah, again, this is an album that I just don't have much to say about. And also, this isn't any anything against the album, but the album cover of Dance of Death is one of the worst I've ever seen. Um, yeah, this is not a good album cover at all. Looking at it is an eyesore. It's like if the characters from Jimmy Neutron did a bunch of drugs and wore a bunch of masks and got like shirtless for some reason. Yeah, this album is very. This album is definitely a step up from Virtual 11. Like Virtual 11 is like a 2 out of 10, and Dance of Death is like a 5 out of 10. Like a strong 4 to, if we're going by like Anthony Fantano routes, it's like a strong 4 to a light 5. So not even like terrible, but like just not very inspiring. And I personally just don't like it very much. But again, if Virtual 11 or if Dance of Death are one of your favorite albums, I can see where you're coming from. Like um, maybe not Virtual 11. That I would have some question marks for you there. But like if Dance of Death was one of your like favorites or in the top 10 or even top 5, like if you personally enjoy it, that's great. I just don't enjoy it as much. So kind of along the same realm of Dance of Death, number 15, A Matter of Life and Death. A little bit better. I'd say about a solid 5 for A Matter of Life and Death. Um, Yeah, Different World is really good. Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, The Longest Day, The Reincarnation of Benjamin Brieg, Lord of Light. I like a lot of these songs, but the others, it's very inconsistent. Um, yeah, I really, it's not one of my personal favorites. Um, I will say that for this album, I think it's a little more focused than Dance of Death. That's why I probably put it uh, above their previous album. So they made A Matter of Life and Death right at like 3 years after they made Dance of Death as their follow up. So um, really, again, like with Dance of Death, I just don't have much to say about this one. So here we go. Number 14 is Senjutsu, their latest album. And this was a disappointment. I put this album above Dance of Death and A Matter of Life and Death, and like, I'm kind of regretting that because this album just was boring. It's one of the most boring Iron Maiden albums, and there's just not much oomph to it. It got great reviews from critics, but the fan reception was like positive-ish, but also not really like not too great. The two singles off the side, their first two singles at least, Stratigo and The Writing on the Wall are like Ford F-150 commercials. Like it just doesn't sound like Iron Maiden, like their power and speed metal that they helped pioneer. Not really speed metal, but they had some pretty fast songs. So, um, I will say, like, this is an instance where disc two, or well, the back half of the album, I think is significantly better than the first half. Um, yeah, well, Days of Future Past is a pretty good song, but like Darkest Hour and The Parchment are both really good. And then Hell on Earth and Death of the Celts are both, um, they have their moments, and there are moments on this album that really shine. It's just very long and very. I hate to compare it to something like The Astonishing by Dream Theater for how long it is, because this album is a little more exciting than Um, then The Astonishing, that's another album I should have said. Like The Astonishing is so bad. Um, yeah, that's for another day. I will probably rank the Dream Theater albums at some point, but for now, yeah, Senjutsu just not as good of an album as I had hoped. So number 13 is No Prayer for the Dying. And some people will put this as their worst album, and I get it. This album definitely after the run they had in the 80s for the 90s, this album was released in 1990 to come out after the first seven albums they put out, and for this to be arguably their worst, they're definitely their worst album at the time, and one of the worst overall. But I put it as like a 6 out of 10 personally. Um, this is like my first 6 out of 10. And I mean, this album has some absolutely goofy moments. This is one of the goofiest Iron Maiden albums. Mother Russia, um, Holy Smoke is just Public Enema number one. Yeah, I mean that those songs are just kind of ridiculous to listen to. But then again, they do have some really good songs on here, like Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter and Fate's Warning I actually like quite a bit. Run Silent, Run Deep is actually one of probably a top 30 Iron Maiden song for me, genuinely. Um, yeah, there's a lot of good on this album. The first album that Yannick Gers played on, um, and he's been in the band ever since then. Um, yeah, I actually think he does a pretty good job here replacing Adrian Smith, who later did, rejoin the band for Brave New World in 2000, which I will talk about later in this episode. I'm not going to spoil where it is on the list, so you'll just have to keep listening. So, so yeah, so far, should probably recap. So Virtual 11 at 17, Dance of Death at 16, 15 is A Matter of Life and Death, 14 is Senjutsu, 13 is No Prayer for the Dying in 1990. So number 12 is The Final Frontier. This album is like, I've seen so many mixed opinions on this album. Some people really don't like this album, and some people really love this album too. So I, I I'm kind of indifferent on it. I think it has some fantastic songs. I think the first two songs, Satellite 15 and El Dorado, are absolutely incredible. And then also Isle of Avalon, Starblind's really good. Um, When the Wild Wind Blows, The Man Who Would Be King. There's some great songs on this album. It's just it feels kind of like with Senjutsu, it just feels a little long. And I don't think the music necessarily makes up for all of it, but then again, I think this is again, it's a very solid 6 out of 10 album. But yeah, I mean, I think this is an album that really, if we're talking about like post, 2000s Iron Maiden, like that's a pretty good mark to have. So yeah, Final Frontier at number 12. So number 11 is The X Factor. Blaze Bailey joins as their lead vocalist after Bruce Dickinson leaves. Um, I actually like, for music wise, for what this album offers, despite no Bruce Dickinson, no Adrian Murray, is actually pretty good. And I think this album is better. I think, yeah, I think this album has gotten a little more positive. Like retrospective wise, I think this album is better than like they that it had in the past, because this album was not well received. Um, and there are some moments that are just eye rolling. There are some moments on this album where it's just like, ugh, can this end already? But it has some unreal moments on this album. Sign of the Cross, Lord of the Flies, Man on the Edge. Three incredible songs to kick off this album. I personally love them. Um, The Edge of Darkness is also a very good song. One of my personal favorites. Um, yeah, there's some great moments on this album, but then again, it's just like it sounds different because there's no Bruce Dickinson, there's no Adrian Smith, and did I say Adrian Murray earlier? Because if I did, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not, yeah, whatever. But yeah, no Adrian Smith, no Bruce Dickinson, but still a good product. I like the X Factor. Wow, what a surprise. It's still like a 6 out of 10. But yeah, so now we will move on to a 7 out of 10 album. That would be Fear of the Dark in 1992. This was the last album with Bruce Dickinson until 2000, when Blaze Bayley ended up joining. This album has is a roller coaster, but the highs are incredibly high. A lot of it, admittedly, does sound like an AC/DC album, uh, but it also has some incredible songs. Be Quick or Be Dead, From Here to Eternity, Afraid to Shoot Strangers. The title track is incredible. Fear of the Dark is amazing. Um, yeah, Fear is the Key is really good. The Fugitive. Um, but again, a lot of it, again, music wise, some of it does sound a bit dated and a bit like, ugh, can this end already? But at the same time, this is my first 7 out of 10 album for Iron Maiden, and that appears at number 10 on the list. So, like, say that's pretty good. Um, so yeah, I think that, yeah. So that concludes like the double digits in the list. So number 9 is The Book of Souls from 2015. This is a solid 7 out of 10. Um, yeah, The Red and the Black is incredible. Death or Glory, Speed of Light, the title track Empire of the Clouds is really good for an 18-minute epic. Um, there are some long songs on this album, but like I really like this album personally. I think the music suits it a lot more for being a bit longer than normal. That I think they failed at. Not necessarily, well, failed's a bit too strong of a word, but they didn't do as good a job of on Senjutsu in 2021. I think Book of Souls, they got it right on that one. And yeah, it just they just sound a lot better, and I just don't think they were able to replicate it. If they do make an 18th studio album and they continue going down more of like a progressive metal path with the Book of Souls and Senjutsu, hopefully they capture more of the Book of Souls sound. That's all I'm saying. So, yeah, with that, we get to this is a bit of a controversial one because a lot of people will put this in their top five. Some of them will put this album at number one, and I have it at number 8 on my list. So, what album am I talking about? Why, it would be Peace of Mind from 1983. One of their classic records. How could I possibly put this at number 8 when it has tracks like The Trooper and Die With Your Boots On and Where Eagles Dare? Why would I possibly put that, at number 8? Well, that's because a lot of the other songs on this album are just kind of whatever. I mean, they're not bad, but I just don't like the backside of the album. Like, I mean, To Tame a Land is really the only other song I actually like on this album. And then, because like Still Life, Quest for Fire, Sun and Steel, I mean, even the song like Revelations just doesn't do much for me. Flight of Icarus never did much for me. But again, I have to take into consideration like the songs that I do like on this album, Where Eagles Dare, Die With Your Boots On, and then The Trooper. The Trooper, like possibly their best like known song. Probably one of their best like top 3 songs is on this album, The Trooper. And yet like the rest of the album just doesn't do a ton for me. I don't know. Like it's just sort of like whatever for me. But a great album. Like still, even with that, like the not great songs on here aren't bad. They're just kind of whatever. Like I could take it or leave it. Like To Tame a Land is probably like the only other song I'd regularly go back to listen to, but I don't know. But again, the highs on this album are unbelievable. So I mean that I can't put it too low. I can't put Peace of Mind too low. So next up is Brave New World from 2000. This and Peace of Mind are both like sevens teetering on eights, is what I would say. Um, yeah, I think that's fair. I used to put Brave New World up there with like a 10 out of 10 album. I don't think it's that for me anymore, but it's still pretty good. No, you know what? Yeah, I'd put Brave New World as an eight. I'd put Brave New World as a solid eight. And then Peace of Mind is like a seven teetering on an eight. Yeah, the Wicker Man, Brave New World, Blood Brothers, The Mercenary, Out of the Silent Planet. I had great songs, man. There are some great songs on here. Um, I mean, and again, the other ones that I'm not super crazy about are just like, whatever. Um, yeah, I mean, I like this album a lot. I can't hate Brave New World, especially with this being the first album that Bruce Dickinson came back for. Bruce Dickinson and Adrian Smith both came back for. And yeah, this is the first lineup when they were a six piece. Three guitarists, a bassist, a drummer, and Bruce Dickinson on lead vocals. So yeah, great great album. Yeah. So number six. This is my only 9 out of 10. Again, the top five albums are all 10 out of 10s. This is where it gets really good. So, the album I have at number six, and the only nine on the list, is Killers from 1981. This is the second and final album with Paul Di'Anno. Rest in peace, Paul Di'Anno. Um, yeah, this album, this and it's the previous album, um, or the album that came before this one, chronologically, are very punk influenced. This album and their debut, Iron Maiden, are both laced with punk, laced with punk. But they did it so good that it like almost birthed a new genre in its own right. And like they played it much heavier, much faster than punk music, and they definitely got a really good career out of it. Um, the reason why this album's not a 10 is because, again, the songs that I'm not super crazy about are like whatever, like Innocent Exile and Drifter. I'm not super crazy about, but the songs that are really good on this album are really good. This was also the first album with Adrian Smith on it, who replaced Dennis Stratton. Um, the Ides of March, being an instrumental to go into Wrathchild. Oh my God. And then follow that up with Murders in the Rue Morgue. And then Another Life follows that one. Then you got the instrumental that's Genghis Khan. Dude, that is a, that is, a, those are five songs that are really good. And then Killers starts off the title track starts off the second side of the album. Oh my God. Yeah, that is incredible. And I actually like a song like Prodigal Son. Purgatory is also really good. Um, Twilight Zone is that's only for the North American edition, but like I also love Twilight Zone. So yeah, I consider Twilight Zone to be part of Killers. Um, so yeah, I really like this album is super good. It's not a 10. Is it a 10 though? No, it's not a 10. It's again, it's a solid 9, but like it's still really good. So I don't have to go too far to find their number five album, and that would be an album I've already just mentioned. It was Iron Maiden, their debut album. Oh yeah, I also forgot to mention Martin Birch. Uh, his first album that producing Iron Maiden was Killers. Because Iron Maiden their debut was produced by Will Malone. There were a lot of production problems. I'm not going to pretend that this is a lovingly produced album. It's not. That's like the main detractor for it for many people, but it's a 10 out of 10 because all the songs on here are incredible. Like there's not a singular bad song on this album. There's not even a singular middling song on this album. I love everything about this. Prowler starts off the album, and then Remember Tomorrow is a fantastic ballad. Running Free and Phantom of the Opera are on here. Their first like real epic was Phantom of the Opera at 7 minutes. And then like Paul Di'Anno's vocals are just incredible. On both albums, they're incredible. But like Um, yeah. And then you have Transylvania, one of their better instrumentals from back in the day, going into Strange World, another pretty good ballad, then going into two headbangers with Charlotte the Harlot and Iron Maiden. Oh, just talking about this, it like makes me smile so much. And like this is again, there's so much from Iron Maiden to talk about because with their first two albums in Iron Maiden and Killers, it's basically like you're walking through London almost. You're walking through London and there's a lot of like gangs around and you're in your leather jacket. It's raining. You're like running through the back alleys where the lights are all on, and there's a bunch of scandalous activity going around. That's Iron Maiden and Killers. It's very real. These are very real metal albums. And starting with, their third album when Paul Di'Anno leaves or got fired, whichever story you end up believing. Um, yeah, from Number of the Beast on from 1982, Iron Maiden starts to really go in more of like a mystical, like fantasy oriented element, but at the same time, yeah, and I'll talk about it in a little bit, but yeah, Iron Maiden and Killers are just very raw, but I love them for that. And Paul Di'Anno is like the perfect vocalist for combining metal and punk with the energy that they have. Um, Being very young. All these musicians at the time are very young in their 20s, maybe even in their late teens for some of it. But yeah, these two albums are incredible. So Iron Maiden and Killers I kind of lumped together, but Iron Maiden's a 10 out of 10. Just because there's no like again, like I said, there is no bad song on here. So that is my first 10 out of 10. Um, God, what an album, man. What an album. I hate that that's number five because it's so good, but that's just Iron Maiden's discography for you. So number four is Power Slave. Power Slave um, develops an ancient Egyptian theme, uh, the pyramid on there, all the sphinxes. You can tell in their music. This is a very desert, hot oriented album, but it's still very energetic. Ace's High kicks off the album. It's fast and intense, 2 minutes to midnight, incredible. Um, the other three on eh, I don't really like the other three on the album very much. Um, I mean, they're okay, but like they're good, but not great. But then like Back in the Village, Power Slave, and Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. Yeah, that's a 10 out of 10. Like I can't yeah, I genuinely cannot hate this album. Like even the not so great tracks, like I'm not skipping them. Like they still have their moments of pretty great musicianship. But the way it starts off and the way it ends, oh, it's so good. Oh, it is incredible. It's so incredible. Um, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, just another great epic. Power Slave has one of my favorite guitar solos possibly ever. It's so good. The way they structure this album is also really good. So great stuff there. That is my second 10 out of 10 at number four. At number three, this is an album a lot of people put at number one. There's a lot of people who have this as their favorite, and I get it. I absolutely get it. It is a 10 out of 10 album, but it is not quite number one. That would be The Number of the Beast from 1982. I hate that I'm putting this album too low. Yeah. So The Prisoner might be the only song on this album that I'm not like incredibly crazy about, but it still has some good moments on it. Outside of that, oh my God, you have Invaders to kick off the album. This is the first album with Bruce Dickinson. The first voice you hear of Bruce Dickinson is on Invaders of all songs. Good Lord, that is a great song to kick it off with. And then you have a ballad in Children of the Damned that's super good. 22 Acacia Avenue, that's a sequel to Charlotte the Harlot or a prequel to Charlotte the Harlot. I'm not quite sure, but it's still great. And then you have side two. Gangland, a lot of people don't like Gangland. I personally like it. It has a pretty good riff to it. It's a good song. But when you have that song on a side where you have three of possibly the greatest metal songs ever written, you're that's stiff competition. So, Number of the Beast, Run to the Hills, and Hallowed Be Thy Name. Hallowed Be Thy Name. That right there is like heavy metal, like that is like the Bible. That is the holy grail of heavy metal music. That side, that like 15 minutes of music is insane. It is insane how good those songs are. Unreal. Especially, I mean, Hallowed Be Thy Name might be my favorite Iron Maiden song. And I hate that I'm putting the number of the beast at number three because I think the two at the top are like just ever so slightly better. But the number of the beast is still 10 out of 10. It's my third 10 out of 10 Iron Maiden album. So, what should possibly be number two and number one? Well, if you are an Iron Maiden fan, or if you're looking at the discography of Iron Maiden, you definitely know what two albums are still remaining. They're back and back in the 1980s, 1986 and 1988. Somewhere in Time and Seventh Son of a Seventh Son are my two favorite Iron Maiden albums, but which one triumphs over the other? Just barely, because they're both 10 out of 10s. Um, you ready? Number two is Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. Holy crap, this album is amazing. It is like this era of Iron Maiden, I love it personally because with the 80s, you had this heavy use of synthesizers. And not every band who was like a metal band or a rock band really played into it all that well. Iron Maiden played into it perfectly, in my personal opinion. I'm just like the track listing on Seventh Son of a Seventh Son is insane. When you hear that synth on Moonchild, and then it goes into the guitar synthesizer with the opening riff, it is incredible. It is an incredible a song to kick off the album. And then you follow that up with Infinite Dreams. You follow that up with Can I Play with Madness? You follow that up with The Evil That Men Do. And then after that, like after side one, where it's incredible, just it's this incredible like track, like a 10 out of 10 side. This the song that kicks off side two lays waste to all of it. Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, the title track. Like what are we supposed to do here? And then you have the prophecy, the clairvoyant, like two very good songs, like nothing great, but still pretty good. Not like filler by any means, because it plays well with the album. And then you end off the album with Only the Good Die Young, not a cover of the Billy Joel song, but yeah, still great in its own right. And like, what else can I say? What else can I say about this album? It's perfect. This is a perfect album. It's 10 out of 10. But it's not number one for Iron Maiden because that distinction, rightfully so, is for Somewhere in Time. Somewhere in Time is my all-time favorite heavy metal album. It's my favorite Iron Maiden album. This is one of my favorite albums, period. Genuinely. I love this album. This album holds a special place in my heart. It is it is 51 minutes of music heaven, and I really do mean that. Like I get emotional. I get chills talking about this album. Even the B-sides on this album. The B-sides. That girl Juanita, Reach Out, Sheriff of Huddersfield. It's I mean, they're B-sides. They're not like fantastic, but like they're still good. When the B-sides on this album are like could like make up a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 album, you know you've got something special. And boy oh boy, this album. This album is insane. It starts off with Caught Somewhere in Time, one of the best openers in heavy metal music ever. You follow that up with one of their most well-known songs, one of their biggest hits in wasted years. You follow that up with Sea of Madness and Heaven Can Wait. And that's like to like the, again, like with Seventh Son, to me, this is a damn near perfect side one for any album. And then you get The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, another great epic by Iron Maiden. And then it goes into my favorite Iron Maiden song. Is it Hallowed Be Thy Name or this one? That is a tough question. I don't know. Personally, they should both be number one. They should be 1A and 1B. Stranger in a Strange Land is to me the song that is so perfect that like it's like it's indescribable almost how perfect of a song Stranger in a Strange Land is. It really like I love it. I love it so much. Um I mean, Deja Vu is the only one I'm not like super crazy about, but like it's still a great song. And then it ends on another historical epic, a history lesson about Alexander the Great. And it is amazing. It is a perfect ending to this album. Um, it's like a sci-fi album almost, but it's like robotic with sense, but it also kind of brings you back a little bit to the first two albums in a way where it's kind of rugged and you're in London and you're still like navigating the streets, but this time you're like this um Blade Runner almost. It's like you're Harrison Ford fighting Rutger Hauer. And you're like it's like again, it's almost indescribable how great this album is. Um And yeah, a lot of thanks to the Iron Maiden members, all the producers who make Iron Maiden, especially for Martin Birch. Also, rest in peace. Also, had some great works with bands like Rainbow and um, Blue Oyster Cult too. But Iron Maiden's what he's known for most, and this album is amazing. But yeah, for his run producing from Killers to Fear of the Dark is amazing. Iron Maiden's run from 1980 to 88 with Seventh Son of Seventh Son is like almost unmatched for any metal band. It's that good. The golden age of Iron Maiden. And I love it. I love a lot of other Iron Maiden albums. But I mean, this is the era where Iron Maiden was like on top of the world for metal music. And for that, I can't be thankful enough because it's a band that I hold close to my heart. And this album in particular, Somewhere in Time, is the epitome of that. So, with that being said, um, thank you all so much for listening. If you learned a little bit about Iron Maiden, there you go. Um, Should also mention on every Iron Maiden album cover is Eddie, their mascot, their undead mascot. So if you're looking at the albums and you have no idea what that character is, there you go. Should probably mention that beforehand in the video, but there you go. Yeah, I want to do this more often, aside from talking about sports and college basketball. Want to do this more, probably do it a little more in the off season when there's no college basketball on. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm very happy with the way this has gone. So I want to do some more lists like this. So let me know if you have a favorite artist you want me to do, or I mean, it's obviously needs to be an artist that I have listened to, but like, I'll do some other lists as well. So again, thank you all so much for listening, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.